most of you probably have heard that we had a little contingent from our community at the Nehemiah retreat at Unity Village this last week. And people always go, well, why is it called Nehemiah? Who is Nehemiah? Because even though Nehemiah is a character in the Bible, most people don't know much about him. And I'm not going to tell you a whole bunch about him. But Nehemiah was an assistant to the king, and he was feeling pretty bummed because the walls of Jerusalem had come down and Jerusalem was in ruins, and he didn't like that. So he got permission from the king to travel to Jerusalem and rebuild the city. And so he did that, and he went off to Jerusalem, and he gathered the people and built the walls and made it happen. And so the Nehemiah retreat at Unity Village is named that because the whole idea that was conceived, a while ago by Reverend Tom Lee was that people who were interested in supporting Unity Village could come and help rebuild the village. And because there's always more stuff to be done, right? Unity Village was bought, the first part of Unity Village was bought 99 years ago. I know, right? And so people would come in the old days, they would come and work on the farm, and they would come and help out, and that's just what they did. And then, kind of as the world changed and how we did things in the world changed, it wasn't just like you could just show up and just kind of pitch in. That's sort of not how it worked. So this Nehemiah retreat is a way to come back to that, even though it's a little more formalized process now. And so we showed up and we did stuff. So even though it's a little hard to see, there's Sue on a ladder painting something. There's me on a ladder painting something. We did other things other than that. What? Yes?
Point out to Marie with my hand wrapped in
yes.
tape.
She does have her hand in the
Yeah.
stuff in the painting. Sue shows up even with her finger all post 2 weeks off of surgery. And then there's Ladora with, did you rake all of those leaves?
I raked half of them.
She raked half of those leaves. Look at that.
And got them in the truck.
And got them in the truck. So, and that's not the only things we did, but there's just a few of the things we were up to at Unity Village. And so I was thinking about this idea of regular maintenance, because what we do when we come in Nehemiah, some of it's things like planting the things and raking the leaves, the kind of things that you have to do all the time, every year. And then there's other projects, like some of the things that Sue and I were working on, which, you're like, well, we need to paint that wall, but it's not as high priority as this other thing. So 10 years later, you still need to paint the wall. And so those are the kind of things that kind of throw the Nehemiah folks at, things that would be great, except for the staff are usually putting out bigger fires than that. So we painted some and did those kind of projects as well, those things that got kind of put off to the side. And so that idea of that regular maintenance, you wouldn't go, you get your car oil changed on a relatively regular basis, right? That's an important part of keeping it going and doing all the other things you need to do. Because we know that our cars work better if we take care of those things, right? And we know that our houses do better if we do things on a regular basis, like change the air filters in our furnaces and clean the gutters out and whatever. We do, our houses work better if we do those kind of things. And our bodies work better if we water them every day and we feed them every day and make good choices about what we feed them and clean them and all of those things, right? We take care of our bodies. So the question is what about the regular maintenance that we do for our consciousness? You had to know that was coming. Nancy knew it was coming. So here's the question. What thoughts are we feeding ourselves? I was at a meeting for the regional board before I went to Kansas City, and somebody said something, and I'm not saying that they, whatever they said bugged me. It wasn't at me, just something, like you're in a meeting, people have different opinions, and that's a normal part of the thing. We have different perspectives. But what their perspective really annoyed me. And so I was like, in my mind a little bit about that later, because I kept coming back to it. And it's like, well, I could still sit here and be annoyed by it and all of that. Or I pulled out my notebook and did a little bit of like, this really bothered me. Why did this really bother me? And did some of that so that and then even though I didn't actually come to any resolution, I still think they're wrong. I'm not thinking about it anymore. I didn't think about it again at all until I was thinking about putting it in this talk, right? It was totally off the table for a whole week because I just let it out. And so now I'm not holding on to that in my consciousness. Can you believe they think that? That's so dumb. Yes, I know. I'm like all like ministers do think those kind of things. And so then there's so that's one thing to think about, like what kind of stories are we feeding ourselves about the world, or things that are happening to us in the moment. And what do we make it mean? Because we're meaning-making machines, so we hear something that annoys us, and then we make it mean that they're wrong or dumb or not as evolved or whatever, when it just means they have a different perspective. Right? So there's that. But then there's also, what kind of things do we say habitually? I heard someone say in the last week, like a need to justify doing a thing because they liked it. Well, I just really liked it, so I had to buy the CD. But I don't usually buy CDs, but I really liked it, so I had to buy the CD. I'm like, why are you having to justify buying a CD that you really like? I mean, it wasn't like a $1,000 purchase, it was a $15 purchase. Like, it's okay to like things, it's okay to like the things, to buy the things that you like, as long as it's in your budget. And I know that this was in the person's budget, so I didn't think that there was any need to like spend a whole lot of time justifying liking something, justifying showing up in the world, and just being in the world. You don't have to justify being alive and being present. You're allowed to take up space. But there's this thing that in our world today that some people don't think that they're allowed to show up and take up space, that their worth is not as much as someone else's worth. And these are the kind of things that we may consciously or unconsciously know that we have going on. You don't have to justify doing the thing you want to do, or going where you want to go, or hiking the mountain you want to hike. Use wisdom, obviously. Take your bear spray, obviously. Always take your bear spray. But you don't have to discount or say, well, I don't want to, you've heard those excuses. You may have heard them coming out of your mouth. Hopefully you haven't. That would be super great. But we probably also, I think that because of, and you make yourself small. We don't need to do that. So part of our regular maintenance is to notice when we're making ourselves less than we are, or less than we deserve to be, and stopping it. Clean out whatever it is that's telling you that you don't get to be everything that you gloriously are. Because these kind of self-awareness, so one of the really important things in the processes that I was working on, and I know that Sue was working on in her project this last week, I did a lot of scraping of old paint and chipping. And sometimes you just go, whoop, and it goes, it comes off in this big chunk. And you're like, well, that was ready to go. And if I had put paint on that, it would have been a wasted effort, right? We have to prepare the surface. The job you do is only as good as the preparation you take, right? So we can do the work of like, I've got a shiny new consciousness and I believe the world is fabulous and that's how I'm going to show up. But if we still believe somewhere inside of us that we're not worth showing up for, then it's not going to do us any good, because one little poke of my putty knife and bam, it's going to pop right off. That's how it works. For walls and for consciousness. I even brought home a couple little chunks of concrete that I popped off a wall as this little souvenir. But, you know, if I didn't pop it off, it would have just popped off, you know, right away, and it would be completely wasted effort. I didn't get to do any with the stuff with the tape and the mud and all of that, but you did, and I know some other people did. And so that was, not only did we have to clean the surface, we have to prepare the surface and do some healing work. I would say that was healing work, that you were, you know, filling in the gaps and saying, oh, there's a thing here that needs to be brought together. And then you can do the pretty shiny stuff on the top. But the pretty shiny stuff is only as good as the foundation underneath it. And so there's the thing about regular maintenance, right? So some of the projects that we did, we had to do these big scraping and everything, are partly because some things just don't get the regular maintenance they deserve because other things are more important, quote unquote, more important, right? And that may be true for walls in the water plant or in the tunnels, but it's not true for ourselves and for our lives. And so there may be little things that we've let fester for a while. Because, you know, those childhood or young adulthood silly things that we did. Yes, my oh so precious story. Yes, my oh so precious. They stick around until we do the work of cleaning it out and putting the mud and the tape and the whole thing, right? So this self-awareness process is not necessarily pretty, but it is an important part of us moving forward and being able to really shine and do our thing. And so we're going to continue as a community, we working into some more tools about these things, but this is the preemptive preparatory warning. Here it comes. And so when we wanted to do our regular maintenance of our consciousness, there's a few things that we can do, right? Of course, we do our regular meditation practice, our prayer practice, because that gives us an opportunity to kind of still the monkeys and things come forward. And we go, oh, I forgot about that thing. And maybe if it comes up, maybe you want to journal about it because that like helps you release it, or share it with a trusted friend so you can release it. That's very helpful. And it's also very helpful to just notice. Just notice. Am I having a response to something that does not equal the stimulus? Have you ever had one of those where it's a little thing and you just like find yourself really stressed out, or maybe you say words you probably didn't mean to say. Well, I wonder what that's about. Maybe that's a time for self-reflection, right? So when we're doing this maintenance of our consciousness, we notice and we adjust. And we notice and we adjust. And we notice and we adjust. We don't have to try to make everything all happen at once. And there's no judgment, right? Because we just notice and then we do better. And then we notice and we do better. And we continue to work until we've retrained our thoughts to not go wherever they were going that we realized wasn't where we wanted them to go, right? It takes a while to retrain our thoughts. And there's no timeline. That's what we have to remember. There's no judgment. It's easier if we don't judge ourselves or make that into the story, right? Because that's another thing, is making that into the story of all the stuff. Let go of the drama, let go. And that there's no timeline. These things take as long as they take. So we just notice and we adjust, and we notice and we adjust. We do a little sanding, do a little scraping, notice and adjust. And so that in that way we can be like Nehemiah, not only rebuilding a physical city, but also to know what's ours to do, and then to move forward with faith to build it.